Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm used to saying good morning, but it's not morning right now. So I want to thank you for being here today for today's webinar. This is all about the power of better questions. Now, today I'm not going to be just giving you all these questions to ask that are better questions than what you may be asking today, but we're going to be exploring a simple but powerful idea really together. That the questions we ask shape the way that we think, the way we communicate, decide, and ultimately the way we lead. So most of us are trained maybe to look for answers. We want to find the solutions, the next steps, make decisions. But before we get to the answer, there's almost always a question guiding us, right? And sometimes the issue is not that we don't have enough answers, but sometimes it's that the questions we're asking are too narrow, or maybe they're too reactive. They set people on the defensive, or they're too focused on the wrong thing. So today, we are going to look at how asking better questions can help us to improve our decision making, deepen our understanding, and create more meaningful dialogue within our teams. I want to start off by saying that all this information that I'm going to give you today is not based off of one single book or model or framework, but instead it's really bringing together different leadership models and practices, some of my coaching approaches, some communication strategies that I've learned along the way being in this office, the Office of Leader and Culture Development. So really, it's just a whole lot of things that are influencing this information that I'm going to give you. So before we go any further, I really want to start off with the poll. The question is, how often do you intentionally think about the questions that you're asking? Do you constantly think about it? Do you sometimes, maybe? Do you rarely or never? It's just whatever pops into your head, that's the question that you're asking. Sometimes, constantly, constantly, sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, we've got constantly, we've got this range. So a lot of the times, we're not often saying, hey, uh, how are we going to be thinking about these questions? Most of us are probably asking questions all the time, and some are constantly thinking about how to word the question, and some may be thinking pretty rarely on how is this answering how is this answering what I want it to answer? So a lot of us, we need to pause and think, hey, is this the right question? Is this question helping the conversation? Is it leading us towards clarity, understanding, or action? And so, thank you for answering. You know, a lot of the time, sometimes we ask the question and it that just comes naturally. Sometimes the question might be asked because you're frustrated, or there's a sense of urgency, or you just need information quickly. But better questions require intentionality. And even a small shift in the question can change the direction of the entire conversation. So I want to talk about that today. This slide is really showing like the path of how questions shape outcomes. It starts with a question. And this question, whatever question it is, whatever question we're asking really determines where our attention goes. So where our attention goes shapes the thinking that we're having, and then our thinking influences our actions, and our actions lead to results. So I'm going to give you an example here. Imagine a project is behind schedule. I think we might all feel this way, right? The first question that you ask, if this is your first question, who dropped the ball on this? Well, your attention is going toward blame. Our thoughts are going to blame. So it goes from finding the person responsible, and it can create some defensiveness. People may start trying to protect themselves because they don't want to be the one being blamed for anything. Instead, maybe we ask something like, hey, How can we figure out the problem together? So a lot of the times, um, whenever we're thinking about questions, we need to kind of reframe it in our mind. Instead of asking something that might be defensive towards somebody, we can ask something like, hey, what's getting in the way of the progress? So it's the same situation, the same, it's still something was dropped, right? The ball was dropped on this project, but we're asking a different question. It's shifting from blame towards solving a problem. And that sometimes can create a whole different outcome than what we are uh, realizing that can happen. And that's the power of better questions. We don't just find answers. We find answers to the questions we're asking. So if we want better results, we have to pay attention to the questions that are driving our thinking. We have to pay attention to when we need to ask certain questions. Not all questions create the same kind of energy. They're not all created equal. On the left, we have, okay, who is to blame? This question can really get us, it may give us some information, but it often creates defensiveness. It can cause people to shut down. It can cause people to protect themselves or point the finger at somebody else. But on the right, we have what can we learn? What can we learn from this? The ball was dropped, but hey, what can we learn from this mistake going forward? This question really creates a different environment because it opens the door to reflection, growth, and new opportunities, new improvements that we can make. The important part of this is that better questions are not about avoiding accountability because, yes, accountability does matter. The ball was dropped somewhere, and that can be really important. But accountability does not have to begin with blame. We can start asking questions, and those better questions can still get us to the responsibility, to the accountability, but it does it in a way that keeps people thinking, engaged, and focused on moving forward rather than being in that defensive mode. So today, I'm really going to focus on four purposes of great questions. The first one is that questions create awareness. These are the questions that help us pause. They're helping us reflect and notice what we may be missing. Second is that questions deepen understanding. These are the questions that really help us to listen better, we're understanding others, and we're avoiding to jump to conclusions. Third is questions improve our decisions. These are the questions that help us test our thinking. We're considering options and we're making stronger choices. And the fourth one that I want to talk about is that questions inspire action. These are the questions that help people move forward with clarity and ownership. So as we go through today's session, I want you to think about not just asking more questions, but asking the right kind of questions for the moment. What is the purpose behind the question? So let's start with the question to create awareness. That's the first purpose we're going to talk about. Some of the most powerful questions are not the ones that we ask out loud. They're really the ones that we ask ourselves. So this one's all about that self-awareness. So what am I assuming? This helps us to kind of pause and recognize that we may be filling in the blanks without realizing it. We all make assumptions, and when we don't know the answer, we start filling in those blanks and telling ourselves a story. The second one is, what am I avoiding? This is a powerful leadership question because sometimes we avoid the conversation or the decision or maybe an action that we know we need to take that would actually move things forward, but we avoid it. Maybe it's, that's just our strategy. We're going to avoid it. Well, it's actually just avoidance. So, what am I avoiding? What am I not seeing? This is really important as leaders because we may not see the whole picture. There might be things that are happening that we don't know about. And so if you're asking yourself, hey, what am I not seeing? This is kind of inviting humility in, and it reminds us that our perspectives might be limited. We're in whatever seat we're in, and we may not know what else is going on around us. What matters most right now? This is really going to help us cut through the noise and refocus on what is most important. There's a lot of stuff happening in our day to day, right? But we need to know what is most important right now. Awareness questions are important because we cannot shift what we don't know. If I don't notice that I'm making assumptions about a certain situation, I will act on my assumptions like they're facts rather than just an assumption. If I don't notice that I'm avoiding something, I might call it, like I said earlier, a strategy. Or maybe I'm going to say that this is all about patience. I'm just giving them some room to maybe get it together. But it's actually just avoidance. Better questions start with being honest with ourselves. And this is all about that self-awareness. And we need to have that self-inquiry to really get to the bottom of creating awareness. The second purpose is deepening our understanding. And this is where better questions can completely change the tone of a conversation. So look at this question on the left. Why would you do that? Now, technically, that is a question, but how does it make you feel if somebody asked you that? And it might have been my tone also. I know that tone plays a big role, but if somebody just came to you and said, "Hey, why did you do that?" Yeah, defensive. I'm going to immediately be like, "Well, what in the world did I do? What did I do?" Uh, yeah, judged, right? It's automatically setting you on this defensive mode before the conversation even starts. So, yeah, for many people, it's going to feel like judgment. It's going to sound like, well, that was a bad idea. It can make um, just the conversation go off the deep end before it even gets started. So, instead, we can ask questions like, hey, how can I better understand your thinking? Because I want to know the why behind that decision. And this question, it really opens us up to curiosity. We're not leading in with defensiveness. We're not leading with blame. Instead, we're leading with curiosity. It really is saying, hey, I want to understand your thinking. It doesn't mean that you have to agree. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be that accountability still, but it starts with understanding before you evaluate and blame. So in teams, this really matters because meaningful dialogue really requires that psychological safety. And so if you're shaping your questions to make people feel like they can explain or they are able to question or clarify and contribute without immediately being judged, that is all you really want that on a team. And so better questions really create room for that to happen on your team. So curiosity changes the conversations. So questions that build trust. This goes along with what we were just talking about, but trust is really built when people feel heard. And people rarely feel heard because someone gave the perfect response. They feel heard because someone was genuinely curious about what was going on. And so these questions really help build trust. So this first one is not really a question, but I'd like to use it. It's just tell me more. This is simple, but powerful because it communicates that you're not rushing to respond. Hey, tell me more about this. What don't I know? Right? What led you to that conclusion? And all of these things, if they're said in the wrong tone, it could set people off, right? But this helps us to kind of understand someone's reasoning behind whatever action they took instead of just reacting. So then we have, what concerns do you have? A lot of the times we may not know the challenges, the concerns that somebody has unless we ask, right? because Anita and I talk about this all the time. Like, we're not going to ask for help. We have a hard time asking for help. And so that is something that, like, I need to take back, right? What concerns do you have? Hey, this really invites that honesty. It gives people permission to name what's uncomfortable or uncertain and ask for help. And then what perspective am I missing? This one is especially important for leaders because it demonstrates that humility that we talked about. It says that, hey, I don't know the whole picture maybe, and I want to know more. And so you're building trust within this. Like I said, people rarely feel heard because someone talked. They feel heard because someone was curious. The quality of dialogue on a team often improves when leaders just ask questions that make people feel safe to tell the truth. And that is really all about these questions that build trust. The third is the questions that improve decisions, that decision-making questions. Better questions help us to make better decisions because they help slow us down enough to think clearly. In decision making, a lot of the times we're moving quickly, especially whenever there's pressure on us, which I think we all know there's a lot of pressure on a lot of us, right? But fast decisions are not always the best ones or the most wise decisions, right? So these questions help. What are we missing? We've got blind spots. Where are they? We are not always going to see those blind spots. And that's why getting different perspectives from different team members helps this. What evidence supports this? So this is separating the facts from the opinions or the assumptions. And this helps us to make those decisions. Oh my goodness, the decisions that we should be making. What alternatives exist? This prevents us from getting locked in to the first idea, right? And what could go wrong? This really helps us to think ahead and prepare. We don't want things to go wrong, but we want to make sure that we are prepared if they do. Better decisions is not about asking questions, like endless amount of questions. It's really about asking the right questions so that when you do make that decision, you do so with greater clarity on why that decision was made. The fourth purpose is action, right? We're trying to lead and get to an action forward. And some questions keep people stuck. These are the questions that help move people forward. So let's look at this one. Why haven't you done it? Again, there may be a time and a place to understand why something was not done, why something happened, but asked in this way, it can feel that accusatory, that defensiveness, that judgment. Instead, how can I better understand the challenges you are facing? This question changes the conversation. It moves from that accusation to the obstacle identification. Instead of someone feeling like they need to defend themselves, they can really begin identifying what's blocking them. So maybe the issue is not having clarity. Maybe it's those competing priorities or confidence or the resources. And they just need a little help making sure that the next step is clearly defined. Action-oriented questions help move people from feeling stuck to the next step. And so whenever I thought of this one, I really thought about connecting it to coaching. And in coaching, I'm an executive coach. And so the goal, I'm not giving people answers, but I am helping them think through things, taking ownership, identifying their own next step. And so these were some of the questions that I was like, hey, these might help move people forward. What would success look like? This helps us create a clear picture of the desired outcome. Once you have a vision for where you want to go, you can start chunking it up, right, into those next movements forward. What's one step forward? I don't know about y'all, but whenever I get in these huge projects, it can be overwhelming. And so I need to, yes, the project is huge, but what is the next step forward? This keeps people from getting overwhelmed by the whole problem. What's within your control? I know in another webinar I talked about the circles of influence, right? There's only a certain amount of things that we can control. And this really shifts the attention from everything outside that, we can't influence, we can't control everything. And it shifts it to where what can we actually act on? What can we actually do? What's within your control? And what options do you have? This helps people see those possibilities instead of feeling trapped. Sometimes they just need to brainstorm with somebody. Great questions don't just get answers. They create that momentum, they create movement. So let's pause for another quick second and answer this question. Which question do you feel like is most powerful for leaders to ask? Is it, hey, what am I missing? What can I better understand? What are we not considering? What needs to happen next? And you can just put the letter that corresponds with it. Yeah, awesome. So the great thing about this is that there's no wrong answer. Each question really serves a different leadership purpose. And this is why having that um, power, that knowledge of when a question should be asked and when it's needed in that moment is so um, it's needed. You need to be able to discern when certain questions are asked. So, what am I missing? Well, that's all about creating awareness, right? Whether that is creating awareness for yourself or asking, hey, what are we missing in this moment? What about this? That helps people to really gain that confidence to speak out whenever they might have a, a certain perspective that we may not be seeing right now. How can I better understand? Well, that's all about deepening that connection with each other and the perspectives, right? What are we not considering? Well, that's improving our decision making. Again, asking certain people, hey, what are we not considering in this moment? That's also goes along with what are we missing? What needs to happen next? We're moving people towards action. Again, the power of knowing which question is needed in the moment is a great, great thing to know, which is hard. It's hard. So this question is, or sorry, this slide is really all about bringing the whole webinar together. You're going to see the questions that I've kind of asked already, but um, this webinar is not about giving you the questions. It's all about giving you some tools, but allowing you to change the questions to whatever fits you and reshaping the way that you are asking questions. But if you only remember 4 questions from today, and I think I've said them multiple times throughout this webinar, I would encourage you to remember these. Awareness, what am I missing? Understanding, how can I better understand? What are we not considering? And what needs to happen next? So remember, whenever you are creating that awareness, we're just pausing and recognizing that we may not have the full picture. When we're trying to get the understanding, it helps us to really listen before we judge, before we blame others. And we really seek that perspective before we are responding. When we're um, talking about the decision-making question, what are we not considering? It helps the team to slow down again and identify those blind spots. And we are making stronger decisions because we've already fleshed out a lot of those unknowns. And then what needs to happen next? This is that action question. It helps move the conversation from decisions to progress. And so these 4 questions can be used in meetings. You can use them on one-on-ones, coaching conversations, really anything that you need to ask a question. You can start using these 4 areas to be like, hey, what is the purpose behind my question, right? So now I want you to do a quick question audit for yourself. Think about the questions you ask naturally most often. Are you usually asking awareness questions, understanding questions, decision questions, action questions? Most of us have a default. And so you don't need to put it in the chat, but I just want you to be aware. Which type of question do you ask most often? And then which one do you ask least often? None of these are wrong. There's no wrong answer. There's no right answer, but it's all about the opportunity to notice whether we're overusing one type of question or underusing another. Because each of these questions serve a purpose. Each of these types of questions serve a purpose. A leader who only asks action questions may move really quickly because they're trying to get the next thing going, but they might miss some of the understanding or the awareness behind it. And a leader who only asks understanding questions may create connection, but there's never a decision that's being made. So thinking about that, having the awareness behind what questions you're asking is really all about making sure that you are using all the types of questions for the specific purposes behind what outcome you're wanting. So I want you to do a reflection. Think about one challenge. It could be a team issue, a decision you need to make, a conversation maybe you're avoiding, project that feels stuck, or a situation where you're just really frustrated. And ask yourself, hey, what questions am I currently asking about this? And how can I make it a better question to ask? So sometimes we don't need a completely new strategy for how to deal with things. Sometimes we just need a new, better question to open up a different path forward. Because remember, the question that we ask ourselves at the very beginning can shape what result we're going to have. So I want to close with this thought. Great leaders are not defined by having all the answers, right? Leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about asking the kinds of questions that help people think, learn, and move forward. The power of better questions is that they change the conversation. They move us from maybe having a reaction to reflection, from judgment to curiosity, from assumption to understanding. So my challenge to you this week is simple. Pay attention to the types of questions that you ask. Before your next meeting, ask yourself, hey, what question would help us think more clearly on this? Before your next difficult conversation, what question would help me understand and not put that person on the immediate defensive before a conversation's even started? So I want to thank you today for being here, and I look forward to seeing everybody at the next webinar.